Hi, this is Marlene Gibb with What Do You Do? And today's guest is Leonard Zane. And you want to be called, nobody knows you by Leonard, so we'll just call you Zane.
Right. Everybody uses my last name.
Right.
I like it that way. Intraverse is a science fiction story, and that involves a family, two families actually, and children, but it's this huge cosmic metaphysical adventure. And that starts, we finally built the super collider at Waxahachie, Texas, and this leads to big things. Well, I also do have a science background. I was a grants manager at Caltech for 3 years, actually in the fuel cell research group. But I've always had a scientific bent. And on Intraverse, for example, the consulting scientist on that was John Clauser, who discovered quantum entanglement. So I've always had a science inclination. I wrote this thing down when I was 27. I decided my purpose in life is to want to make life beautiful. That's it. And that's very subjective, of course.
Yeah.
But I lived by that credo ever since. And so everything I did, like the architecture, well, here were these beautiful new structures that I had a part in getting the project, getting the commission, contracting for it, helping the process go through that we could actually materially create what we did without going broke.
Right.
And I developed something, actually I learned from George Lucas indirectly. I saw this film that gave me the creeps when I was in college, THX 1138. It's this underground, chilling, futuristic fantasy movie. I won't call it science fiction, but it was futuristic fantasy, and everybody's grim and they're underground and there's no love and all this stuff. And finally this one character played by Robert Duvall wants to escape, and he gets into some auto that looks like a rocket-powered Maserati and these subterranean tunnels, and he's going through all of that, and so the government or the powers that be are chasing him, and so they have these robot policemen on motorcycles that are chasing him, and you're hearing this dispatcher's voice, a female voice saying, officers are at whatever kilometers away from him and closing, and we are operating at 80% of budget. So that gave me an idea on something we developed called predictive project budgeting, where you could compare the percentage complete that you were in a given phase of a project or the project itself, and then compare that with the percentage of budget consumed, and you got a new percentage called a budget status percentage, and that would predict for you, were you going to make it or weren't you? Were you going to go over budget or not? But there was still time to do something about it. So with this predictive project budgeting, you were able to, you could do about 10 things if you had time, to change the destiny of where you were headed if it were not good.
That sounds like a really good thing.
I thank George Lucas if he's out there seeing this.
No, I mean, really, that's something very good for businesses.
But true science fiction, SF we call it, is actually more serious. It has more science in it. It's not just futuristic fantasy. It actually is connected with science, as with the Intraverse story, for example. Star Trek was quite science fiction, because they had a lot of science. And especially Next Generation was very highly focused on science. Less so with the original generation, but still had quite a bit of science. And people like Isaac Asimov, Theodore Sturgeon, even in the original Star Trek, were consultants to Gene Roddenberry on that.
And what about Forbidden? That's one of your favorites. Is
and by the way, I did do material that was in some of the Star Trek films. I did manage to get some of my writing without credit into Star Trek 3, and then I wrote a formula on how to do a Star Trek, and that was used by Nick Meyer, who was the actual screenwriter of Star Trek 4. So I did actually get stuff in there, and I got a nice letter back from Gene Roddenberry on it, but no credit. No credit and no compensation.
And then you have your books on Amazon.com.
Yes.